You hear about Thermopylae, and you think 300 Spartans. You think heroic last stand. You think Hollywood warriors flexing abs against 1,000,000 Persians. Almost nobody talks about the math that doesn't add up. Herodotus says 20,000 Persian dead in 3 days. Modern historians whisper maybe 120,000 invaded, maybe 300,000. Nobody agrees. 7,000 Greeks, 50 feet wide at the pass. Bronze and leather and spears. How does a bottleneck kill that many in 72 hours? What happens when you look past the myth and count the bodies? 6,000 Persians dead. 200 Greeks lost. Darius died before revenge. Xerxes spent a decade building the biggest army the ancient world had seen. He marched from Sardis in Lydia in spring of 480. Thrace, Macedonia, Thessaly, they surrendered without a fight. By mid-August, he's at Thermopylae. The Calidromo Massif on the other, steep cliffs, thorny brush. A pass, maybe a few hundred feet wide in 480, silted up now to over a mile. Back then, barely room for a single wagon. 3 narrow sections, the east gate, the middle gate, the west gate. The Phocians built a defensive wall at the middle gate sometime before, stone and mud brick, low barricade. This is where the Greeks set up. If you value documented Greek and Persian military history like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. Also, this script is researched and factual, using sources from Herodotus' histories written around 430 before the Common Era. Archaeological excavations by Spirit and Marinatos in 1939 that recovered approximately 100 bronze and iron Persian. Arrowheads from Colonus Hill as documented in the archaeologist.org publication from August 2025, and analysis from Diodorus Siculus' Bibliotheca Historica from the 1st century before the Common Era. Now back to the information. Leonidas wasn't the heir. His older brother Cleomenes ruled. Cleomenes died in 490 under violent circumstances. No male heir. Leonidas takes the throne. He's 50 years old when Xerxes invades. You make beds from reeds. You get little food. You're encouraged to steal, but if you're caught, they flog you. You fight each other constantly. Age 12, it gets worse. Age 20, if you survive, you join a communal mess. You're a full citizen. You serve 40 years in the military. Leonidas chose them specifically. If they die, their family lines continue. The oracle at Delphi supposedly told Sparta, either your city falls, or a king from Heracles' line dies. Leonidas believed he was going to certain death. Block them at Artemisium at sea, 40 nautical miles away. Force multiplier. The pass neutralizes Persian numbers and cavalry. The strait prevents the fleet from outflanking. 500 from Tegea, 500 from Mantinea, 120 from Orchomenus in Arcadia, 1,000 from the rest of Arcadia, 400 from Corinth, 200 from Phlius, 80 from Mycenae. That's 3,100 from the Peloponnese alone. Boeotia sent 700 from Thespiae and 400 from Thebes, though Thebes was leaning toward Persia. The Opuntian Locrians sent every available man. Herodotus doesn't say how many. Phocis sent 1,000. Total, around 7,000, maybe more counting the Locrians and light troops. The Persians. Herodotus claims over 5 million total, land and sea. Modern scholars laugh. Logistics don't work. An army that size would drain rivers, he literally wrote that. They'd starve. Modern estimates, 120,000 to 300,000. Still massive. The core was the immortals, 10,000 elite infantry, handpicked by the king, special training, short spears, wicker shields, bows, daggers, cloth caps, scale armor, light and mobile. The rest were conscripts from across the empire, Medes, Persians, troops from occupied territories. Xerxes also had cavalry, war chariots, archers by the thousands, 7 to 8 feet tall spears called dori, bronze helmets with crests, bronze breastplates, shin guards, the hoplon shield, 3 feet wide, concave, bronze-faced, wood core, leather straps, 15 to 20 pounds. Each man's shield protects the man to his left, the phalanx, 8 rows deep, sometimes more, shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping. You move as one unit, you thrust with spears over the shield wall. If spears break, you use the xiphos, a short iron sword. The formation is nearly impenetrable from the front. Attack from the side or rear and it collapses. Western Gate. Local shepherds used it. Locals raided Phocis with it. Leonidas stationed 1,000 Phocians on the heights to block it. He thought it was covered. The man said Spartans do that before they plan to fight to the death. Xerxes sent envoys. Surrender your arms. Leonidas' response, Mullen Labe, come and take them. 2 words. Carved in stone forever. The Persians can't get through. They try to flank. No room. The cliffs on one side, the sea on the other. They push harder. More bodies, more spears. The Greeks rotate fresh men to the front. The Persian light infantry has short spears, wicker shields. They can't match Greek reach or armor. They die in piles. Herodotus says the Medes were cut down. Xerxes, watching from a golden throne in the foothills, reportedly jumped from his seat 3 times in rage. His elite, 10,000 strong under Hydarnes. They charge the pass. Same result. The phalanx holds. The immortals can't break through. Herodotus says they were bloodied. They had no advantage in the narrow space. Their bows were useless at that range. Their light armor couldn't stop Greek spears. They pulled back. Spartans, Thespians, others taking turns. The pass is littered with Persian dead. Blood, broken spears, shields. The Greeks are taking casualties too, but light compared to the Persians. The Spartans, Thespians, Arcadians all holding together. That's the Spartan mentality drilled into them from age 7. The path starts east of the Persian camp. It winds along the ridge of Mount Oenopeia, steep, narrow in places. The Persians cross the Asopus River. They march all night. The Udian Mountains on their right, the Trachinian Mountains on their left. At dawn on day 3, they reach the summit. The Phocians are stationed there, 1,000 men. They hear footsteps, rustling, too late. The immortals emerge. The Phocians are caught off guard. Showers of arrows. The Phocians panic. They think they're the main target. They retreat to a higher defensive position on a hilltop. The Persians ignore them. Hydarnes doesn't waste time. He continues down the path. The Greeks at the pass are now surrounded. Most contingents want to leave. Leonidas recognizes the situation. He orders most of the allies to retreat. Save yourselves. Fight another day. Some sources say he wanted to buy time for the rest of Greece to mobilize. Some say he followed Spartan law that forbade retreat. Some say he believed in the oracle's prophecy. A king must die. They volunteer. Their homeland is next in the Persian path. They're defending their families. 400 Thebans. Leonidas keeps them, maybe as hostages, because Thebes was Medizing, siding with Persia, possibly up to 900 Helots. The 1,000 Phocians were supposed to be on the mountain, but they're out of the fight. Total defenders for day 3, roughly 2,000 men, minus casualties from the first 2 days. The Greeks advance out from the middle gate into the wider part of the pass. They know they're going to die. They fight like it. Herodotus says they fought with spears until the spears were all shattered. Then they fought with swords. Leonidas is killed early in the battle. The Greeks fight to recover his body. 4 times the Persians try to take it. 4 times the Greeks drive them back. The immortals arrive from the rear. The Greeks are surrounded. They retreat to a small hill, a mound behind the wall, Colonus Hill, the last stand. The Spartans and Thespians make their stand on Colonus Hill. Maybe 300 to 500 men left. They still have their shields. Some still have swords. Xerxes sees them trapped. He decides not to risk more men in close combat. He orders the archers. Rain down arrows until every last Greek is dead. Wave after wave of arrows. The Greeks use their shields. They crouch. They fight to the last man. When the arrows stop, the Persians move in. They find every Greek dead or dying. Math starts to work. One scholar on Total War Center forums in February 2009 calculated based on Herodotus' description of repeated assaults by 100 man companies. 10 to 20 casualties per company before withdrawal, multiplied by dozens of waves, the number could reach 10,000 to 20,000. It's possible. It's also possible Herodotus inflated the figures for dramatic effect. Herodotus says Xerxes later displayed 4,000 Greek bodies at Thermopylae. That includes the Thespians and Spartans from day 3, plus anyone killed on days 1 and 2. Most historians estimate roughly 2,000 Greek dead total across all 3 days. The Persians had suffered horrific losses against a tiny force. Xerxes was furious. He wanted the Greeks to see what happened to those who resisted. The Greeks crushed Mardonius at Plataea in 479. The Persian invasion failed. Ephialtes' name became a Greek word meaning nightmare, betrayer, traitor, forever. The identification shifted from a smaller hill further north to Colonus Hill. That's where the last stand happened. That's where the arrows rained down. The archaeologist.org reported in August 2025 that the finds include spearheads, armor fragments, and those roughly 100 arrowheads, all consistent with ancient accounts of intense combat. Persian arrowheads, bronze, iron, small, deadly, the same ones that killed Leonidas and his men on that August morning 2,500 years ago. You can see them, you can hold the weight of history. In 191 before the Common Era, the Roman army defeated the Syrian king Antiochus III at Thermopylae. The lesson didn't stick. Armies kept underestimating the pass. They followed the code. They died. The inscription, Mullen Labe, come and take them. Another statue went up in Sparta in 1969. Same inscription. The Greeks stationed only 1,000 Phocians to guard the most critical flank. Why not more? Why not Spartans? If Leonidas knew the path existed, why trust it to Phocians who weren't Spartan trained? Some modern scholars argue the Phocians themselves might have been complicit, might have been from Delphi, might have betrayed the alliance to restore local control over the sanctuary. The article from BiblioScout in December 2019, The Phocian Betrayal at Thermopylae, argues the Persians likely knew about the path before Ephialtes, that Herodotus' narrative of surprise doesn't hold up under scrutiny. The Greeks had one card left, the naval battle at Salamis. Themistocles lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits. Same principle as Thermopylae. Neutralize the numbers. Let skill and armor win. It worked. The Persian fleet shattered. Xerxes fled. But Athens was ash. The Greek fleet stayed intact. The Persians took casualties that weakened them for Salamis and Plataea. 3 days, 20,000 Persians dead if Herodotus is right. 2,000 Greeks dead. 7-to-1 kill ratio in a defensive position with every geographical advantage. That's not a miracle. That's math. That's terrain. That's training versus conscripts. All trained from age 7. They knew they were going to die. Why 300? Herodotus says Leonidas picked men who already had sons. Genetic survival. Family lines continue. But there's another angle. 300 Spartiates was a significant portion of Sparta's full citizen class. Sparta had maybe 8,000 to 10,000 full citizens at this time. Sending 300 was a statement, not a token force, a real commitment. But not enough to risk the city if Persia invaded the Peloponnese next. The 1,000 Phocians who failed. The thousands of others who retreated on day 3. The narrative becomes 300 Spartans versus the world. It's cleaner, it's heroic, it's not the whole story. The phalanx's weakness is mobility and flanking. The Spartans knew this. That's why they chose Thermopylae. That's why Themistocles insisted on it. Geography is a force multiplier. The pass was worth 10,000 men. The Greeks won. Mardonius died. The Persians fled. The invasion ended. Thermopylae taught them the strategy. Salamis and Plataea executed it. They tried to copy it. None succeeded. You can't replicate a society built entirely around war. Sparta enslaved the helots to free the citizens for constant training. Sparta limited trade to maintain control. Sparta killed weak infants. Sparta allowed women property rights and education so they could run the estates while men trained. The system was brutal, ineffective, and unsustainable. By the 4th century, Sparta's citizen population was collapsing. Not enough births, too many casualties. The helots outnumbered them 20-1. Sparta never recovered. Historica, Plutarch's Lives, archaeological findings documented in Beyond the Gates of Fire. New perspectives on the Battle of Thermopylae published by Pen and Sword in 2013, and excavation reports from the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Now back to the information. Their city, Thespiae, was in Boeotia, directly in the Persian path. If Thermopylae fell, their families died next. They fought, knowing it. When Leonidas offered them the chance to leave on day 3, they refused. Demophilus, their commander, kept them there. Herodotus recorded this. But Sparta claimed the glory. Plataea ended it. Marathon proved Greeks could beat Persians 10 years before. But Thermopylae became the story. Why? Sacrifice. The 300 stayed when they could have run. They chose death. They bought time with their lives. That resonates. That's universal. Every culture understands that trade. A king from Heracles' line must die or Sparta falls. He was the king. He was from Heracles' line. He stayed because prophecy and law demanded it. The 300 stayed because their king stayed. To leave would be disgrace, exile, loss of citizenship. Their families dishonored. They stayed because the alternative was worse than death. That's not romance. That's coercion, dressed as honor. Herodotus says Xerxes ordered the bodies hidden. He dug trenches. He buried 19,000 of the 20,000 Persian dead. He left 1,000 visible so the fleet arriving wouldn't see the real casualties. He piled leaves and earth over the trenches. He didn't want morale to collapse. The fleet saw 1,000 Persian dead, maybe a few thousand Greek dead, and thought the battle was close. It wasn't. The Persians were butchered in that pass for 3 days. Thermopylae became myth while men who fought there were still alive. They were nothing compared to Spartan hoplites in a phalanx. Greek bronze stopped their swords. They couldn't win. Xerxes fed them into the meat grinder anyway. They failed again. Only when Ephialtes showed him the path did Xerxes stop wasting lives on frontal assaults. 2 days, thousands dead. He could have scouted the mountains on day 1. He didn't. Arrogance, impatience. It cost him. Feeding 300,000 men, even 120,000, requires constant resupply. Every day at Thermopylae was another day his supplies dwindled. He had to push through. The Greeks knew it. They dared him to try. The landscape is different. The sea has moved, the pass is gone, but the springs remain. The Greeks washed in them before the battle. After the battle, the Persians washed their swords in them, blood and sulfur. The water runs hot, year-round. They don't see the bones. Those were buried or dissolved into soil centuries ago. They see a statue and a parking lot and a wide plain where a narrow pass used to be. History is hard to see when the geography has changed. Medieval chroniclers repeated it. Renaissance artists painted it. Modern filmmakers CGI it. The details shift. The core remains. Small force. Overwhelming odds. Sacrifice. That's the story we keep telling. So we tell it. We simplify it. We make it clean. We forget the helots and the Thespians and the Phocians. We forget Ephialtes had reasons. We forget Xerxes won. We forget Athens burned. We remember 300 Spartans and a word, Malin Labe. The Greeks retreated. The Persians won. The Spartans died not in some glorious charge, but huddled on a hill under arrow fire. The Helots died beside them. The Thespians died too. Ephialtes was a local man seeking reward, not some deformed monster. The Phocians failed not because they were cowards, but because they were surprised and outnumbered. Xerxes didn't send 1,000,000 men. He sent maybe 150,000, which is still massive, but not apocalyptic. They kept the fleet at Artemisium long enough to stay cohesive. When the fleet retreated, it retreated in order. When the Greeks faced the Persians at Salamis, they weren't demoralized. They were angry. Thermopylae showed them Greeks could kill Persians. Lots of them. Salamis proved it again. Plataea finished it. That's why he tried to hide his casualties. That's why he desecrated Leonidas' body. He wanted to break Greek morale. It backfired. The Greeks rallied around the martyrs. The Spartans became legends. The Thespians were honored. The Helots were forgotten. That's history. The winners write it. The survivors shape it. The storytellers simplify it. The truth sits in the dirt with the arrowheads. A soil core taken near Kolonos Hill in the 20th century showed signs of mass burning. Cremation. The Greeks recovered their dead eventually and burned them. Ashes and bones. The Persian trenches weren't excavated fully. They're somewhere under the modern plain. 19,000 bodies buried in haste. No markers, no names. The Persians who died at Thermopylae have no memorials, no statues, no epitaphs. They were conscripts from across an empire. They were Medes, Scythians, Persians, others. They were fed into a pass by a king who couldn't admit defeat. They died fighting Greeks they'd never met for a cause that wasn't theirs. Their families never knew where they fell. Their bones are still there, somewhere under the soil, under the highway, under the parking lot. Time and weather destroyed it. But Pausanias, a Greek traveler in the 2nd century of the Common Era, saw it and wrote about it. The lion marked Leonidas' stand, the last place he fought, the hill where the arrows fell. The Greeks didn't forget. For 700 years they maintained the site. After Rome conquered Greece, the memory faded. The pass silted up. The springs remained, the stories remained, the geography changed. In 2007, the movie 300 came out. It was based on Frank Miller's comic. It was stylized, fictional, full of abs and slow motion and monsters. It made $350 million. Thermopylae was back in popular culture. People argued about the accuracy. Historians wrote articles debunking the film. Nobody cared. The story was what mattered. 300 Spartans against the world. It resonated again, because we still need heroes. We still need sacrifices. We still need stories about standing against impossible odds. Real life is complicated. War is ugly. Heroes are flawed. Leonidas was a king in a slave state. The Spartans were brutal. The Helots were oppressed. The agoge was child abuse by modern standards. The phalanx was just tactics. The pass was just geography. The battle was just 3 days of men killing each other for dirt. But the story is clean. The story is simple. The story is 300 men who chose death over dishonor. The story is a king who believed prophecy and stayed. The story is a last stand on a hill while arrows blocked out the sun. The story is Malin Labe. Come and take them. The story is a betrayal and a sacrifice and a warning that echoes through centuries. Some things are worth dying for. The story, and the story will outlive us all. It fell. Maybe it hit a Spartan. Maybe it hit a Thespian. Maybe it buried in the dirt. Marinatos found it 2,379 years later. He knew what it was. He knew what it meant. This small piece of bronze killed someone. This was the weapon that ended Thermopylae. Arrows, not swords, not honor. Arrows from a distance, fired by men who never saw their targets fall. Brave men fighting to the last. That's true. But the Persians won by not fighting. They stood back. They used bows. They rained death from above until every Greek was down. That's not heroic. That's practical. That's war. You use the tools that work. The Persians learned the hard way. 2 days of frontal assault, thousands dead. Finally, they used archers. Problem solved. Open terrain. The Persians tried the same archer tactic. The Greeks charged before the arrows could decimate them. They closed the distance. They brought the fight to spear range. They won. Thermopylae taught them the weakness. Archers need distance. Deny them distance. They're useless. The Greeks rushed. The Persians broke. Mardonius died. The army fled. The war ended. The Greeks passed. The Persians failed. Xerxes went home. The empire never invaded Greece again. The lesson was clear. Greeks are too expensive to conquer. The terrain favors defense. The hoplites are too strong. The city-states will unite if threatened. Leave them alone. Sparta won but was exhausted. Thebes rose. Sparta fell. Macedon rose. Philip II united Greece by force. Alexander III, his son, invaded Persia. The roles flipped. The Greeks conquered the Persians. Thermopylae was avenged. or inverted, depends on perspective. They pushed through, they marched on Athens. They burned it, but they lost the war. The Greeks won the story became history, the history became legend. The legend shaped Western civilization, democracy, freedom, the idea that a small group of trained, committed defenders can stop an empire. That's Thermopylae's legacy. The ones who stayed and the ones who retreated to fight again. The betrayal, the arrows, the cold math of casualties. The 3 days that changed Western history. That's the real story. That's the one worth telling. Not because it's clean, because it's not. Because it's complicated and ugly and full of contradictions. Because real courage is messy. Real sacrifice is complicated. Real history is full of forgotten people and inconvenient truths. Thermopylae happened. The Greeks fought, the Persians died. Leonidas fell, the 300 died. The 700 Thespians died, the Helots died, the Phocians failed, Ephialtes betrayed. Xerxes won the battle and lost the war. Athens burned and rose again. Sparta claimed glory and collapsed a century later. The story survived. The arrowheads remained. The truth got buried. We dig it up. We examine it. We argue about it. We tell it again. Because 2,500 years later, we're still asking, what makes a stand worth it? When is sacrifice meaningful? How do 3 days in a mountain pass matter more than decades of peace? Thermopylae doesn't answer these questions. It just keeps asking them. Every generation has to decide for itself. Every person has to choose. Stay or run, fight or yield, die for something or live for nothing. Thermopylae is the eternal question. The 300 chose their answer. We're still choosing ours.